The little girl's voice, barely a whisper, sliced through the tense silence of the courtroom. "I can read your mind," she said. Laughter, sharp and dismissive, erupted from Judge Elias Thorne. The sound echoed off the high ceilings of the Denver City Courthouse, a jarring contrast to the solemnity of the proceedings. At the center of it all, standing alone like a tiny island in a sea of pinstriped suits, was a girl no older than 8. Her name was Aurora. Her hair, a cascade of dark, unkempt braids, framed a face smudged with dirt. A too large blue windbreaker hung loosely on her frail frame, its sleeves frayed at the cuffs. She was barefoot, and her steps made no sound as she advanced toward the towering figure on the bench. Judge Thorne, a man whose reputation for severity was matched only by his immaculate suits, gripped his gavel. "Who brought this child here?" he boomed, his voice a low rumble. "She asked for you, sir," a bailiff said, his voice laced with nervous strain. "She wouldn't talk to anyone else." Thorne raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "And why is that?" Aurora lifted her chin, her big brown eyes locking onto his. "Because I can read your mind," she repeated, her voice steady. The courtroom fell silent. A few seconds later, a wave of muffled chuckles rippled through the spectators. Thorne leaned back in his leather chair, a smirk playing on his lips. "That's a charming trick, little one," he said, the condescension thick in his tone. "But this is not a stage for childish games. This is a court of law." Aurora didn't move. She just stared at him, her expression unchanging. "You don't believe me," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Just like the others. Not until I tell you what you've been hiding all these years." The laughter stopped. A hushed anticipation settled over the room. 2 days earlier, Aurora had been discovered wandering the streets of a downtown neighborhood. She was barefoot and alone, muttering strange, unsettling truths that seemed to send grown men scrambling. "Your wife knows what you did last summer," she had told a man in a sharp business suit, his face draining of color before he bolted. "You stole $1,000 from your best friend's wallet," Shed whispered to a shopkeeper, who promptly dropped the carton of milk he was holding. "You're planning to run away with her sister," Shed revealed to another man, her voice eerily calm. In each case, their faces had turned pale with a mixture of fear and shock. One man, a burly construction worker, screamed, "How do you know that?" before shoving her away and sprinting off. The police were called. An officer, Detective Miles Corbin, with a gentle demeanor, knelt down. "Where's your family?" he asked softly. Aurora's voice was a bare whisper. "They're gone." "And how do you know all these things about people?" Corbin asked, his professional skepticism warring with the unsettling evidence before him. The girl's big eyes blinked slowly. "I can see them in people's minds. I feel their secrets." "She's delusional," a young patrolman muttered to his partner. But when Aurora turned to him and said, "You're still wearing her perfume, aren't you?" "The woman you see every Thursday," the officer's face went white. Corbin felt a cold shiver run down his spine. "This kid is unnatural," his partner said, his voice low. "What do we do with her?" "She keeps asking for Judge Thorne," another officer said. "Let's take her to the courthouse. Maybe he'll know what to do." And so, here she was. Aurora took another step closer to the bench. "You've hidden it for years," she said, her voice low but steady. "The thing you did. The one that still makes you wake up at night in a cold sweat." Thorne's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. "You're lying," he said, his voice sharp. You're just a scared little girl trying to get attention. Aurora raised her small hand and gently placed it on the crown of his head. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Don't touch the judge. A lawyer hissed from the front row, but Aurora's hand didn't move. Her eyes fluttered shut, as if she were listening to something only she could hear, something deep inside him. You didn't mean to do it, did you? She whispered. Thorne's heart began to race. You pushed her. You didn't think the fall would kill her, but it did. Thorne's face turned ashen. The room grew eerily silent. You buried her near the old railway bridge, didn't you? Aurora murmured, her voice almost a lullaby. You thought no one would ever find out. You became a lawyer, then a judge, and told yourself you'd been forgiven. Thorne shot out of his chair. Enough! He roared, slamming his gavel down so hard the wood cracked. This is nonsense. She's making it all up. But the girl didn't flinch. Then why are you shaking? She asked softly, her hand still resting on his head. The crowd erupted in frantic whispers. Is it true? What is she talking about? Thorne's breaths came faster. His eyes darted to the bailiff. Get her out of here. Now. But Aurora spoke again, her voice louder this time, her small hand pressing just a little harder on his head. You see her every night in your dreams. The woman you buried. The one screaming in your mind even now. Thorne staggered backward, his face pale as chalk. How could you possibly know that? He choked out, his voice hoarse. Aurora opened her eyes and stared straight into his. Because she's still screaming, the girl said. And I can hear her. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Reporters scrambled for their cameras. Lawyers shouted over one another. Thorne's gavel slammed repeatedly, but the sound barely cut through the growing storm. Order! He bellowed, his voice cracking. Order in this court! But his hands were trembling. Aurora stood still, her small hand still on his head. You hear her too, don't you? She whispered, her voice eerily calm. Her voice, her cries, the way she begged you to stop. Lies! Thorne roared, his face flushed red as sweat dripped down his temples. This child is manipulating you all. I've never heard anyone. Aurora tilted her head, her braids brushing her shoulders. Then why can I see her? The judge froze. You buried her near the riverbank, Aurora continued, her eyes narrowing. You thought the current would take her body, but the soil was thick. You covered her with rocks from the trail. Thorne's legs wobbled. He gripped the edge of his bench, his knuckles white. Stop, he hissed. You kept her bracelet, Aurora said louder now, her voice carrying over the gasps of the crowd. You put it in a box. It's still under the floorboards in your study, isn't it? Thorne's head jerked up. No one could possibly know about the bracelet. No one. The room fell into a deadly silence. A young man in the back row stood up, his face pale. What is she talking about? What bracelet? Aurora's voice grew sharper. The one he ripped off her wrist when she scratched his face. The one with the small silver locket. The crowd erupted into frantic murmurs. I want her removed now. Thorne screamed, his voice breaking. This is slander. This is, she told me her name, Aurora said, cutting through his tirade like a blade. Her name was Sarah. Sarah Donovan. She was 24, and you promised to drive her home that night. Thorne's mouth fell open. She trusted you, Aurora said softly. But when she said no, you lost control. You pushed her. And when she stopped breathing, you panicked. You thought no one would ever find out. Suddenly, Aurora gasped and staggered back, clutching her head. She's screaming again. The girl cried. Her voice. It's louder now. She says she won't stop until the truth comes out. The judge backed into his chair, his hands trembling violently. I didn't mean to, he choked out, tears welling in his eyes. I didn't mean to hurt her. It was an accident. The room went utterly silent. Every eye in the courtroom turned to Thorne as he fell to his knees, a broken man. Sarah was my sister. The young man in the audience shouted, tears streaming down his face. You told us she ran away, you monster. Reporters shoved forward with microphones, their flashes like lightning in the room. Lawyers scrambled to hold them back. Aurora slowly lowered her hand from her head. Her voice is gone now, she said quietly. She says she can rest. Within minutes, officers surrounded the judge. Elias Thorne, you're under arrest for the murder of Sarah Donovan, Detective Corbin announced, his voice solemn. Thorne's face crumpled. I didn't mean to. He cried as they dragged him from the bench. It was supposed to be a secret. No one was supposed to know. Aurora's eyes followed him coldly as he was led away. She always knew, the little girl whispered. She just needed someone to listen. As the gavel fell for the last time, its sharp crack signaling the end of an era, Aurora stepped down from the stand. Detective Corbin approached her cautiously, a look of profound bewilderment on his face. How did you know all that? Aurora's lips curved into a faint, sad smile. I don't just hear thoughts, she said softly. I hear the voices of the ones you've tried to silence. And with that, she walked barefoot out of the courtroom, leaving behind a profound and stunned silence in her wake, a tiny oracle of truth in a world full of secrets.